Hi. Today we're talking about Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth, Il Labyrinthino del Fauno, and its broader significance to fantasy literature and weird fantasy in specific. To start off with, unlike many of the texts that we've looked at, which have multiple interconnecting narratives, Pan's Labyrinth really has different levels. On one level, the movie is the story of Spain during the Franco dictatorship. The fascists, as represented by the captain, who's a brutal bastard and is somewhat incompetent lackeys, is opposed by the Marquis, who execute daring but utterly ill-fated raids against him when they come down out of the mountains. The end of the movie, when the captain, realizing he's about to, die because he's surrounded by his enemies, hands off his son to save his son, and begins his little speech there. Tell him that his father, and he's interrupted and told, your son will never know your name, and shot. I think it's really difficult not to feel that that's a really well-deserved fate that he gets, particularly after watching him beat a father and son to death for no reason early on in the movie, and the various ways that he brutalizes characters continuously through the movie. It's really difficult not to see him as just a universally horrible human being. So on the one level, it's a political commentary. And the Spanish Civil War features prominently in Guillermo del Toro's other movies. The Devil's Backbone, which is an excellent ghost story, is set against the backdrop of the Spanish Civil War. Incidentally, The Shadow of the Wind, which will be the final novel we look at in this class, also takes place during the Spanish Civil War. On another level, you have the sort of familial psychological drama of Ophelia, who finds herself escaping into fantasy because of the uncomfortable situation that she finds herself in. Her mother has remarried a man who is at best indifferent to her, at worst outright hostile. And Ophelia makes the best of a bad situation by sort of fantasizing, this alternate reality where she is a fairy princess. And this reading of the movie, it becomes a very sort of dark tale, because we see the different tasks that she's set to, having ultimately leading to her death. Most critics seem to focus on reading the movie as one or the other of these. And I would point to the fact that the text itself, the movie as text, seems to support a third reading, which is that Ophelia is in fact a fairy princess. I would point to the fact that, first of all, that even though she is the only one who sees some of these things, they seem to have real-world repercussions. When she draws a door on her wall in chalk, she manages to escape being locked in. When the labyrinth sort of unwinds, it allows her to escape, or at least outpace her stepfather, who is pursuing her. The mandrake root under her mother's bed does seem to help her mother's symptoms, and when the mandrake root is burnt, is when her mother dies. So, in a very real way, the fantasy that Ophelia appears to be engaged in does appear to have real-world implications for characters other than Ophelia. Visually, the movie is very stunning. It very much embodies the contrast between the beautiful and the grotesque, sometimes in the same things. Um, the fawn itself is a perfect example of this. Del Toro seems to have drawn heavily from the rich history of Spain, combining Greek, Roman, and Celtic elements, and all of these people lived in Spain at various periods, into the sort of labyrinth, the faun, the standing stones, and the underworld sequences. And a lot of these, the sort of things that are going on, have symbolic meaning in these cultures. I would point to the fact that it would be very easy to dismiss some of the tasks that Ophelia sets herself to as being just sort of the quintessential child's fantasy storyline, that the character must perform some absurd or highly symbolic action. But look at how they comment on the other storylines. The toad, which is poisoning the tree from within, can be read as a commentary on Franco's Spain. The sumptuous banquet that Ophelia must sort of infiltrate and steal the knife without arousing the monster. Look at the dinner party. Very often the tasks that Ophelia is asked to perform seem to, in a lot of ways, sort of lie somewhere between a child's understanding of the adult world and sort of a commentary on that world. If you look at Del Toro's other movies, The Devil's Backbone, for instance, you see that he explores some of these themes in different ways. And a lot of his movies are really, really interesting for exactly this reason. Many of them feature children, often children who are caught in a tension between childhood and adulthood, which again it sort of invokes a form of paradox, which seems to be the ruling factor of the weird. And you see these themes dealt with in very interesting ways. I hope you enjoyed this movie, and I will talk to you again next week.